my favorite paleo snacks. Now, many of you may know the Lara bars out there you can buy in the grocery store. Those are great paleo snack. They can be a little bit expensive, so I'm going to show you a homemade version. I like to call my paleo bars. And we're going to make the basic apricot paleo bar today. So we're going to start off with the dry ingredients. So the first dry ingredient you need is your almonds. So we need about a cup of almonds, and you want to get, half a cup of raw almonds. So here we got our half a cup of almonds. We're going to add this to our basic food processor. Now you want to make sure, later on we'll get to the actual dried fruit ingredients. This is when your food capacitor I'm thinking about Back to the Future, guys, sorry about that. Your food processor is big enough to handle it. The motor can get burned out, I know from experience, so I work with the 5 to 7 cup. Is probably the best to go with. But you're going to go ahead and you're going to add your almonds. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get some raw pecans right here. I like to shop at Sam's, so everything's in bulk. We need a cup of pecans to add to our recipe. So we're going to go ahead and measure that out. And if you add a little bit more, that's fine. You know, no problem with that. You know, we can. This recipe is really flexible. You can double it very easily. So feel free to adapt it however you want. So we're gonna add this to our almonds. Now a little secret to the recipe is we're actually gonna add 1/4 teaspoon of some salt. This adds a little bit of contrasting flavor to our bars, and a little much there, and that'll help the overall savoriness, I guess, if that's a word, of our bars. Now, one thing that's a little outside the recipe that I like to do, I like to add a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, just add a little bit of flavor. And you want to make sure to do this when we're doing our dry ingredients. This just adds a little bit of depth to our bars. It makes them a little bit better for the snacking purposes. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to ground up our dry ingredients here. So make sure that you get everything nice and locked up in your food processor. And I just do it in pulse until we get it into a meal. You don't want it too thin, so we want to have a little bit of chunks there to keep it together and bind it. When you're done food processing, you want the mixture to look a little bit like that. See a little bit of chunks in of the nuts left in there. Also, kind of more of a meal type looking, substance or mixture. So make sure to just put that in a large bowl. We'll be using that relatively soon. Now comes the tricky part. And when I explained earlier that your capacity of your food processor makes a difference, it's in this part. We're going to make our binding glue out of some dried fruit. For the first thing we need to do is you want to get the Medjool dates. I get the ones that are not pitted, so I pit them myself. You can feel free to get the pitted ones if you want. But what you need to do to this recipe is we're going to add 12 of these actual dates to our dried fruit. Now to actually pit the dates, if you want to look over here, you need to take a knife. I like to take just a sharp paring knife. Split it in half, and you see the pit right there. You need to take that out, put it to the side, throw it away later. I already pitted the rest of these dates for us. So you just want to go ahead and throw them into the food processor. Make sure our blade's in there. Throw these in there. Alright. Food processor. Now our next dried fruit. You want to get dried apricots. Now you want to make sure when you're buying your dried fruit that there's no added sugar. That's what makes these paleo. So what we're going to need for this recipe is we need about a cup of the actual dried apricots. And you want to want to make sure to, smush it down. They can be a little bit awkward. So make sure you have a cup because they'll be important to the binding of the dates and the rest of the fruit. Alright, now you're going to add that to our mixture. Now we're going to put it in the food processor and process it until you're going to see it become a giant ball, almost like a glue-like ball coming together. So that's what we're going to do right now. That's the next step. Looks like we got one that got lost. Okay, so you got this really sticky glue fruit mixture here, and you can see we kind of developed it into a baseball or a softball type glue. You're gonna take a spatula. We're gonna add this to our actual dry ingredients. So I'm gonna bring them over here. I'm going to add this to these dry ingredients right here. Okay, now we're going to need to get our hands a little dirty. So we're going to dig right in. We're going to mix it all together. So it's going to become one combined softball. Alright, so now it's going to be a little messy, a little bit sticky, but it'll be worth it in the end. You want to mix those dry ingredients, the nut mixture, right into the fruit. Now just fold it in. Make sure you incorporate as much as the dry mixture as you can. A little bit of a mess, not too bad though. And we have our ball that we will be ready to roll out. And the nice thing about this recipe is there's no baking necessary. It's just nice. It's fairly quick, and it's a great snack to have. Now I will forewarn you, they're a little bit addicting. And dried fruit is a little high in sugar, so just be careful. Don't have too many of these, but they're a nice little treat on occasion. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab some wax paper here. Now I'm going to keep my hands a mess because we still have some work to do with our giant paleo bar ball over here. So I got a baking sheet. I'm going to line it with some wax paper. Alright, so now we want to take our ball and we want to roll it out into a flat, thin sheet so we can cut up into bars. So I like to take, I don't have a rolling pin, so I take a glass and I put 2 sheets of wax paper, one on the bottom on a baking sheet and one on the top, and I just roll away. So you want to roll it the outside like you would if you're kneading a dough, although that's not paleo, so hopefully we're not doing it, unless it's almond flour. But I'm just going to roll it out into a thin mount. It's up to your preference. You can make the bars as thick as you like. I like to, make more bars and have them a little bit thinner. It's completely up to you. So if you want to get a look here at the progress we're making. We're just rolling it out like that. Alright, so now we've got a nice thin layer rolled out, ready to cut our paleo bars. So we're going to take off the wax paper here, leave the bottom layer on, and then I like to cut 3 inches, 2-3 inches for the bars. Thickness, about 1.5 inches, 2 inches. So, it's up to you what you prefer. So you just want to cut down here. And any of the scraps are left to your snacking. always like to cut along the sides a little bit, just a little taste test. You know, you never know. Just gotta make sure it's all right. Okay, those are good. I told you they're dangerous. I warned you here, but I do recommend you make them. So here's our final product. You know, we have our bars. What I like to do then, I like to put them in a Ziploc bag, and I actually like to put them in the freezer for a little while. They're very sticky right when you get done. You know, you put them in the freezer, put them in the fridge, cool them down a little bit, let them rest a little bit, and then you can bring them out you know, enjoy. These are the my homemade paleo bars, the apricot style. I hope you guys make these and enjoy them as much as I do.